Okay, sports fans, this should be a slightly better connection. I am so sorry that we had to disconnect, but apparently when I changed networks, it just stopped the other thing. So what I was doing when I was cut off, and I already posted the earlier part, so I'm not going to repeat anything here in the interest of time, especially since we actually started late, is that my interest in American history came out of a very personal connection to the events that started when white European settlers came to this land. And what was amazing to me and so moving to me was looking at your comments and your statements about your connections to the reading this time around. Whether it was that you got ice cream near the Brethren's house, or something about your own family, or something that you hadn't realized about these characters in the past. I think it's really easy to think that American history is just this kind of saga of disembodied people, moving through time and space, but it's not. It's due to people who made bad, often decisions in challenging moments, and who had to, in an effort to survive, misguided though that might be. So it was really, really meaningful for me to see your connections and your comments and your feedback about this. And I really enjoyed it, and I got some great book recommendations, and I had some amazing new insights into things because of what you said. So I want to thank first anybody who participated by commenting or in our discussion on the All Souls discussion group. So without further ado, and with again, renewed apologies for me about our late start and our technical difficulties, I want to turn to some of the questions that you raised in your comments. We got a few of them off the web just to get us started. And then I'm going to turn the floor over to you guys. Now, here's the thing. Because I'm actually talking to you, my friends Annie and Bridget and Jill and Kat are helping to get any questions that you put into the comments to me. I'm going to give you time to articulate them by starting with the ones we've already got from your comments. I would just want to tell you, I'm not going to answer questions about future books, future characters, future stories, future anything, right? We're here to talk about Times Convert. So if your questions are about that, please don't put them here in the chat, because it's just going to make it harder for all of us here to be able to get to the questions that are about Times Convert and about the reading. So one of the things that really struck me about your comments was that for a lot of you, either you hadn't read Times Convert, or you had read Times Convert, but kind of, wasn't your thing at the time, but how a lot of you felt very connected to the story this time. And that could be because we joined as a community. It could be because you listened to me give my perspective on why I do certain things. It could be because of the moment in time in which we are doing it. Again, big shout out, April 19th. Last night was Paul Revere's ride, the big anniversary of Paul Revere's ride. And, we're meeting on April the 19th, a storied day in American history, the shot heard round the world. And something that was a call to arms for Marcus in Times Convert. So, you're at a very crucial anniversary moment. I think it's the 250th anniversary, actually, of Lexington and Concord right now as we're speaking. So, someone just said, Laro Harper, it was awesome in Boston. Yeah, Heather Cox Richardson was speaking at the Old North Church. Oh my gosh, I would have given anything to have been able to be there. So what an amazing time to have this conversation. So I have a couple of questions first from the All Souls discussion group. A lot of you joined into that discussion that was ongoing on Facebook. For those of you who don't know how to access it, there's an All Souls discussion group Instagram account here on Instagram, which is where you all are. So I know you can get to Instagram. And you can follow the link to the Facebook group, and we will admit you as soon as we figure out that you're not a bot, a troll, or some other maleficent actor on the interwebs, okay? So one of the questions came from Vicky and said, I have a thing about ghosts. I want to know more about them. How Diana sees them around her. Wonder if the kids see them. I also like how Hélène is always there. Would love a book on their story. Why would vampires stay in service this long? So that's a great question. It's one that I tried to answer a few weeks back when I talked about Francoise and Phoebe's relationship. We had put up a post about this. So my ancestors, many of my ancestors were in service. Some were indentured servants, some were domestic servants, some worked on other people's farms, some worked in people's shops. And so the world has always had a very large and active and important service community. Many of you are related to people or are people who are in the service community. These are your nurses, these are your teachers, these are all the people who make the wheels of trash collection and leaf blowing and highway maintenance. All of these people are in a service industry. Nannies, babysitters, if you hire someone to garden or clean your house, you are relying on centuries worth of tradition in which to give service to others was considered to be an important and valued part of a community. And really, all of my stories, all of them are about community and family. There, anything else you're getting is just added extra gravy. What I'm fascinated with is family and community. And in a community, I've been recently studying bees. And let me tell you, beehives, everybody has their job. Everybody knows their job. Nobody's trying to do anybody else's job. And everybody values the job of everyone else. There's one queen bee, but every bee knows what they're doing to support the health and well-being of that hive. So I think the question, why would vampires stay in service so long? The question for me is, why wouldn't they? If you felt that, like I felt called to be a teacher, I wanted to make a difference in the world. I joined a service industry because I felt called to do that. Becoming a vampire wouldn't change that. It wouldn't change it at all. And I think sometimes that our modern world suffers from a sense that to have value, we have to make a lot of money, or we have to occupy a corner office, or we have to have a college degree. We need none of these things to be valued and valuable in a community. And the people in the past knew this. There were always people who wanted something different, but there were plenty of people, my grandparents included, who felt like, my grandmother was a housekeeper. She took pride in being a housekeeper. She knew that what she did was of value to the family that employed her. And because I'm interested in recreating all community and all experiences, and giving them the dignity that they should have, I didn't want a vampire culture in which there wasn't service, because service is actually what glues our community together. And, and when we get rid of the service sector, we don't value them, we're in real problems. Look, I've been a home health caregiver for 50 years and I'm still working. This is what I'm talking about. If she became a vampire, she may decide to leave her career. But it's really true what Laura Bella is saying. Financial and emotional, overconsumption, the sense that we have to have more and better. And this was not always part of the human psyche. Everyone wanted to survive and make the best they could with their family and their life. But nobody necessarily thought that meant they needed to be leading an army or a nation or whatever. So I think it's really important when we talk about, the past, to understand how much the past was brought to you by people who were doing service work, and were doing it with pride, and were doing it out of a sense of how much they were valued. And they were valued in that society, not by everyone. Certainly there's always people who are takers, but we're talking about actual people who really did take pride in their work. As for the ghosts are a very mysterious thing. Some people see ghosts, some people don't. Some people feel ghosts but don't see them. Some people hear ghosts but don't see them. I think that there are a lot of people in the world who think that they have had some kind of brush with the spiritual aspects of this world. Einstein always famously said that, what you see and observe around you is but one facet on a crystal. And to think that there aren't other facets to that crystal is just hubris. So, I always agree with Einstein and Newton whenever I can. And so I totally believe that there are other facets of our existence, including a spiritual facet, and that we do sometimes brush up against them. And some people can see them and other people can't. And it's also like momentary, right? You might see something or feel something in one setting and not in another. Again, if you've had that kind of experience, I have, what I'm talking about, right? You can go to another place and it's like, oh, no, nothing here. But you go to a certain place at a certain time, you're in a certain place in your life, and it's like you have a connection to that world, the world that maybe we would call now, after the Blackbird Oracle, elsewhere. All right, so second question comes from Sheila, and she's quoting a passage, pretty, she crooned, reaching for the slash of light, pretty babies. What did Rebecca see in that moonbeam? For a moment, the light bent toward her, defying the laws of physics as humans understood them. And Sheila commented, foreshadowing Rebecca's magic, I think. You're right. There's a lot of foreshadowing of the children and their magical genetic legacy, the particular ghosts that surround them at a place like Les Revenants or Setur, or indeed Ravenswood, to look forward to the Blackbird Oracle. Children often see and hear things, and we call them their imaginary friends, or we discount what a child says. That room makes me feel really creepy. I'm scared to go in there. Children haven't yet learned to ignore those voices that they see around them. But so it's wonderful to touch base with Becca and Pip at this point. It's also was a way for me to start, showing my cards a little bit about what I saw them developing into. A lot of, they're still only 7. They were toddlers in this book. So yeah, it's all foreshadowing. And you might find foreshadowing going all the way back to Discovery of Witches. If you, go back and are looking for it, because in building out this story, I have planted lots of little seeds along the way that hopefully at some point you'll go, oh, now I understand why she said this in Witches or this in Shadow. It's part of, I think, what makes a series greater than the sum of its parts, right? There's individual books, but somehow the thing about a series is that it sustains a world and develops things across books and within, as well as without and in the historical moment and context. The next questions I've got are from the author page. This one comes from Margaret. I'm really wondering how this is going to play into the new story developing in TBBO, the Blackbird Oracle. There must be so many memories, and which will we find in a memory bottle? Well, that right now is between, me and the characters in my books. I think for anybody who's read the Blackbird Oracle, you are now chillingly aware of how many memory bottles might be in there, how they're stored, how they're neglected, how memories are forgotten, right? I don't think we need to look into the book to see that. I believe that we have forgotten our origin story. We have bought hook, line, and sinker into misrepresentations of that story based on limited evidence. I believe that it is vital for us going forward to understand the promises that America stated and American failures to deliver on those promises. This is all part of our story. But here's the great thing. Plot twists are always possible in a story, right? Individual people can throw plot twists, right? Think about Gallowglass. No plan for Gallowglass. Suddenly the door of the old lodge blows open, in walks Gallowglass, and I think, oh wow, you're interesting. I'd like to get to know you better, right? So it's not, it's definitely memories, our memories of the past, of our personal past, of our collective past, the stories we spin out of them or don't spin out of them. This is what the fabric of history actually is, and we refine it from year to year. We hope never to go back to a place where we're ignoring evidence or findings that are relevant and So memories are going to be crucial. I know what are in a lot of memory bottles. I'm sure I'm going to discover memory bottles just like I discovered Gallo glass that I never actually had a plan for. So we're going to be talking about memories from here on out, folks. And we've been talking about memories since the beginning of the series. If you're looking for foreshadowing and you've got your book on an electronic reader, search for memory across all the books and write down what you find and see if you can see a pattern in all of these things. Little pro tip there. Okay, that's homework, optional homework, because this is the last class. So it's kind of like, optional in its entirety. Mary Ann wants to know, I vacillate between understanding Diana's feeling betrayed as she realized her parents spellbound her gradually and her insistence in the Book of Life that if spellbinding is what it took to keep the twins safe, she'd do it. Okay, hands up if you have the same confusion about Diana changing her mind on this. Guess what? You know what changing your mind is called? It's called growth, right? Who wants to not change their mind? What a horrible tale that tells about resistance and stubbornness and a lack of open-mindedness. It's clear that no good could have come if Knox and other witches had realized the extent of Diana's power when she was so young and vulnerable. You know what? Good could have come out of it, right? Maybe if Knox and other witches had realized it, Gwyneth and the Proctors would have rushed to Diana's side earlier. We don't know. That's like a counterfactual case of history. It's really fun in history, right? What if Paul Revere's horse had thrown a shoe and he'd never been able to sound the alarm? What if everybody got the alarm in Lexington and Concord and said, meh, we're not going to answer the call, right? Other alternatives were there. History is never inevitable because, as I said earlier, what happens in history results from individual choices made in a particular moment to the best of someone's ability. And it can be wild what people do in that sort of situation. As Diana recognized earlier, Mary Ann continues, her parents did what they felt they had to do. I'm not sure it's manipulative, though I can understand how the shock of discovering what a core part of your being was neutered can come and go as memories come and go. Would Diana feel differently if M had told Diana her suspicions about Rebecca and Stephen spellbinding Diana? I don't know. I think that's a really interesting question. At first, she might have been angry at M. She might have severed all relationships with M and Sarah, which would have taken her life on a totally different trajectory. It probably would have weighed on Diana's soul and M's and Sarah's, and it would have taken time and patience and compassion to resolve. And I have to hope that at some point there would have been a change in hearts and minds, because that is growth. That's what we're looking for. I don't know about you. I don't know if this resonates with you. I'm not looking for people to be perfect. I'm looking for people to grow. I'm looking for people to say, gosh, I used to believe that. I don't anymore. My opinion has changed, and to be okay with that. I think we have a zero tolerance policy for human frailty, right? A real problem. And that we want everybody to be perfect around us and to come without a past, without baggage, without complications. That's not it. That's not being human. And, not even saints are perfect. They're not. So we need to have that kind of curiosity, say, wow, why do you feel that way, right? Why did Marcus feel differently about his friends and the brethren than maybe other people did? How did they change his ideas about race, about gender, about education, okay? So this is all just a way of saying, one of the reasons I think you come back for the story, and it's certainly the reason I go back to my desk and I write more of it for you, is an opportunity to say, okay, here is X character. What's changed in their world? What were they ambivalent about? Which way are they leaning now? Which might they lean later, right? That's what keeps us interested in people. And as long as we can be curious and ask rather than judge, then we're going to all grow as a result. This is the great beauty of history, is that it's a lab for empathy. We get to imagine ourselves into somebody else's shoes, as you did with Marcus, as you did with Francoise, as you did with Phoebe in this story, and say, maybe I would have done the same thing, or I wouldn't have because of this reason. So this is what it's all about, right? And this is why this community is so valuable and important to me, because I feel like we're all working together to have those conversations and to grow as individuals and as a collective. Finally, I have a question from Instagram, and if you've got a question, please drop it in the comments and they will relay them to me. Kate Rumtruffle on Instagram, great call sign there. Can you talk a little bit about how you choose the character who will be Phoebe's maker? Well, I think the answers to this are really in Witches and in Book of Life, right? Marcus respects Miriam enormously. They are colleagues. She is always there for him. She saves his bacon on numerous occasions. He's there for her. He really works under Miriam, right? I mean, so he's in service to Miriam, and Miriam is nominally in service to Matthew, but she's really the one who's in charge. And so when I thought about role models, I knew it couldn't be a member of the family, because Philippe did not approve of people making vampires and then having intimate relationships with them if they were part of the family. And that's just kind of like a de Clermont thing. It's not universal. Other people have other creatures, other vampires have other ways of doing it. But certainly for Marcus, he was looking for someone who was not a blood relative by vampire terms. And so the obvious choice was Miriam. And Miriam is one of my favorite characters in the book, and it's because she speaks truth to power. And I thought, if you were being brought on board in the de Clermont family and you were Marcus Whitmore and you wanted your future mate, your mate, to have the best possible outcome, one of the things you would know is that Phoebe will always, Phoebe is now the youngest member of the family, right? She's younger in vampire terms than Pip and Becca. And if you're going to be the youngster, the new kid on the block, having a role model that speaks truth to power is invaluable. It's also Phoebe's own temperament. So Marcus approached Miriam. Miriam rolled her eyes, I'm sure, a little bit and said, I'm not doing this. I don't want to be part of this family, not in any way, shape, or form. I like being an outsider. And then she changed her mind. And now we've got Phoebe, who's going to grow and develop as a member of the de Clermont family and change her positions and change her mind and change her perspective in ways that we all look forward to seeing, myself included. So we've been at it for just about half an hour with all of our little glitches. And what is that?
We have 3 good questions.
And we've got questions. All right, who wants to shoot me, Annie? The first one.
So this is from our friend Joan Nam13. She's saying, what is Marcus thinking about now?
Joan wants to know what Marcus is thinking about right now. Well, I can tell you for absolute certainty that Marcus and Phoebe are in New England. They may have started out in Hadley, but they are probably visiting a battlefield or two in Massachusetts, maybe going to the Peabody Essex Museum and checking out some historical artifacts. And I think for Marcus, he's remembering right now all the friends and family that he lost in the pursuit of making an ideal of we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, or we the people, or whatever it is, that these documents that were so much a part of his growing up, all the people who died starting today for those ideals and who wanted those ideals to be made actual. I think Marcus would, if he were here, he would want to talk to you about all the points where he sees that critical failures were made and not addressed because we don't like to look at our shadows. As we know from the Blackbird Oracle, we don't like to, lift the lid and what's in there. I wasn't happy to find out how many of my ancestors had enslaved people. I was not happy to find out the role that they'd played in various and sundry massacres. I was, I'm not happy that they came here and took land, but they did. And I need to acknowledge that, and I need to understand it, and I need to try to take that knowledge and make good in the world. My guess is that Marcus is actively thinking of ways that he can support the resistance, because frankly, the things that he fought for and that others died for are not being honored right now. A free and independent press, a free and independent judiciary, and representation of the people, by the people, and for the people. These are just like fundamental basics that Marcus is just flummoxed by. He cannot believe that all of the sacrifices made by him, his family, and friends have come to this moment. But he's not surprised. And he's not surprised because he had a lot of time to talk to Philippe. And Philippe said all along, Marcus, this is a promissory note. It's up to you guys to pay it. And you've made this very ambitious statement. And 9 times out of 10, people don't deliver on their promises. So he's had, he's learned at the knee of Philippe de Clermont about the rise and fall of good intentions. And I think he's really soberly reflecting on that and how that he can make the biggest difference. And my guess is that he and Phoebe will return to Hadley today, and maybe they'll invite their neighbors over for a drink. Maybe they will decide to give money to the Hadley Historical Society or the library, or to do some work in the graveyard with old gravestones. But Marcus is going to be thinking about the things he's always been thinking about: equality, integrity, community. That's what makes Marcus tick. What a great question. Thank you so much for that one. Yeah.
We have another great question. Okay, this is from @1Simata. Mm-hmm. Why was Matthew such a bad father to Marcus when he was such a good father to Lucas and now the twins?
Okay, that's a great question. So the question is about why was Matthew such a bad father to Marcus when he was such a good father to Lucas and the twins? First of all, he was not a great father to Lucas. Sorry. But he really wasn't. He was an absent father, as most fathers were, right? Raising children was women's work until that child became capable of doing a day's labor, which came very early in the 6th century. That was another person's department. It wasn't his. He loved his son. And he certainly didn't want to lose him. But by the same token, it's not like he was an active, like Dr. Spock kind of, or how to raise excellent children kind of father. He was a terrible father, as we already know, to Benjamin. He certainly didn't treat Domenico particularly well when he was, a fledgling. Actually, Matthew has a horrific track record as a father, and what he's trying to do with the twins and with Marcus is to retroactively be a good father. And his way of doing it with respect to Benjamin is to take an active role in Jack's life and his ongoing development. But, Matthew is not a great father. He is way too worried and agonized by his own guilt, his own trauma. He's triggered by everything. And thank God that there's Diana and Sarah and Isabeau and all of these other individuals in their lives who are able to be there, right? Because so often our parents do have these sorts of issues. Both Diana and Matthew are really traumatized. And they have a lot of issues to deal with as parents. So they may look wonderful in some ways, but God, are they works in progress. There's going to be some, can you imagine Matthew when Becca starts dating? Holy schmoly. I don't imagine he's going to be an ideal parent right then. Annie, do we have anything else?
We do. We have another question from a suitcase full of books.
A suitcase full of books. My kind of person.
I'm curious about the research process about the places in the book. Did you have somewhere in mind for Marcus's family, the Paris apartment, Les Revenants, or did you travel to research places?
Yeah. So it's a combination. I mentioned that my father and I have been doing genealogical research since the 1980s. My father's family, one branch of my father's family comes from Pelham. One branch of my father's family actually settled Pelham and, started the first tax revolt, Shays Rebellion of the nation. My dad was very proud of that on April 19th and on tax day. He wore his Shays Rebellion t-shirt all the time. If you don't know what Shays Rebellion is, look it up. It was your first tax revolt in these early United States of America. My dad was thrilled that his ancestor was there. And so, the kind of research, I went to Hadley with my father and we looked at ancestral gravestones and the old houses that still exist along this perfectly preserved common. And Marcus just seemed natural to be somebody who came from Western Massachusetts, which is an often overlooked part of Massachusetts in the colonial wars. It was the frontier. It was not Boston for sure. So I thought it would be interesting for him to go there. And it was a place I knew really well, not only because of my ancestral connection, but because I went to Mount Holyoke. And so I had driven through and around and in and visited Hadley, for 4 blissful, wonderful years when I was an undergraduate there. When it comes to a place like Paris, I visit friends in Paris and I go to somewhere like the Marais and I think, oh, that door, wonder what's behind that door. And, lo and behold, I imagine that Freya's life is behind that door. So it's a real combination. I tend not to write about places I haven't actually been to. I myself cannot actually do that. I know a lot of writers who can. They use Google Earth and satellite views and all kinds of things. Something kind of magical happens to me when I'm in a place. It's kind of a strange little alchemical aha moment. And so I tend to be a hoofer who kind of, goes to these places and experiences them firsthand. And hopefully that's one of the things that makes them vivid. So in the case of the Moravians, I used to go on school field trips all the time to the Moravian Tile Works. I used to go to Bethlehem, right? These were all in my backyard growing up in suburban Philadelphia. And they were always this part of colonial history I knew a fair bit about because I was local to it and that I didn't think a lot of other people did. Or Dr. Otto, whose barracks still survive or whatever, and so for me, it's just a way of drawing on very old memories and things I've done that are clearly just interwoven with my imagination and then come out in these books and hopefully you like them too. So any other questions?
We do. We have one from Tweet Jaybird.
Tweet Jaybird. Here's your question.
I really loved this book. Helped to fill in the gaps for me. Why did you call it Times Convert?
Why did I call it Times Convert? And thanks for your kind words about filling in the gaps, right? We all have gaps. I don't know everything about the American Revolution. Nobody does. So thank you that I managed, that the few of my little spackles helped with those. I called it that because of the line in Common Sense where Thomas Paine is talking about how difficult it is to persuade other people around to your views. Sound familiar to anybody? Or to make people understand why you're arguing something you're arguing or feel impassioned about. And Thomas Paine said this really, really wise thing that I think about all the time in 2025. Time makes more converts than reason. In other words, you can argue with somebody until you actually collapse. Time will change their mind in more cases than your arguments. Now, they may remember you made those arguments and they may think, oh, somebody told me this was going to happen, right? Historians experience this all the time because we see all kinds of signs and patterns and we warn you about them and nobody pays attention. And then they're like, oh, remember that historian said that. So that's why, because in my experience as a teacher, and an educator, I've discovered that I can mount absolutely stellar arguments that are fully documented, and people still go, well, I don't know about that. And that maybe something will happen to them, or they'll experience it in a way that suddenly drives that thing home. And that's a really good thing for us to remember, because not everybody wants to grow, and not everybody wants to change and take in new information and think through and reassess their points of view. Some people hold on to their points of view out of fear, out of habit, out of family tradition, out of stubbornness, and out of ignorance. Not everybody wants to grow. Time makes more converts than reason. And that's why I called it Time's Convert, because Marcus is living proof that over time, you can grow and change your mind. He's a good role model. Great question. Thank you. These are such good questions. Annie.
We have another one. This is from Anthropologue. How did you decide which major historical figures to include? It was interesting to compare Matthew and Marcus's circle of famous friends.
Yeah. So this is Anthropologue, or we're probably not pronouncing that right, but we're doing our best here to do the translations. I just chose them based, like you said, I mean, you're on the road to the answer, right? I mean, Marcus and Matthew come from extremely different worlds. Rural Western Massachusetts with an 18th century mentality. Rural French in the 6th century, who has over a long period of time become what looks to Marcus like a wealthy aristocrat, and who is essentially a wealthy aristocrat. Lafayette was really from the Auvergne. I stayed in some of, at one point when I was writing these books, I actually stayed in Lafayette family property. I know where they were living. I know what their villages looked like. I know what their chateau looked like. And so for me, it was just about logically building out who these people would have come into contact with. And the picture that results, I think, is really an accurate reflection of the cross-section of who fought in the Revolution. Enslaved persons, Native Americans, immigrants, Germans, French, white people from England, people from all over the colonies, none of whom got along. One of the people, you might not think of it, but actually the person who is in the wagon taking the dead out of Philadelphia, he was a real person. I just did research. If I can put a real story into these books, so you're thinking, oh, Lafayette, oh, this person. No, I'm talking about the guy with the wagon going back and forth to the hospital in Philadelphia. They're real. That's really their story. I've embroidered it, but my real people are usually long and deep in these books, and they're not just the famous names you've heard of. And I'm a family historian, so give me ancestry.com and I'll give you the world. I teach courses on this, right? Family history, world history, because really what unites us is way more overwhelming in the evidence than what divides us. And that's what I teach through family history and through the stories, the reclaimable stories of very ordinary lives that don't get into the history books. They get into my novels though, and I love that. Great question. Annie.
We have another one, a really good one. This is from Ina Serlin-10.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, question please. Why don't they refer to Jack as their son, but Matthew's grandson? It really hurts me laugh out loud.
Okay, so this is a question about why do they call Jack Matthew's grandson and not their son? It really hurts them. And, here's the thing. Families are very complicated organisms. And I think for this family in particular, lineage is really important. And so, they tend to use grandchild or grandmother as a kind of giant collective term for what are often, 1,500 years of people, right? If I went through and said, Isabeau's great, 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 great granddaughter, you would check out, right? All you need to know is that someone, not Isabeau, sired that person, and she has a grandmotherly role. Technically, Matthew is Jack's grandsire, but his sire is nowhere to be found now and had a very negative influence on him. How many of you were raised by your grandparents, right? And so it doesn't, even though Matthew and Diana fulfill a parental role, and, Jack certainly thinks of Diana as his mother, his relationship with Matthew is a little bit trickier, right? He knows he had, his first experience was not Matthew, it was his father, Benjamin. So I just like to be really clear about these things. And then I also use grandmother in the kind of very broad vampire definition of it, which just means they're an elder in your clan or a scion, because who wants to wade through 15 lines of great dash, great dash, great dash. So hopefully that helps you understand. And I'm sorry your feelings are hurt, but it doesn't hurt Jack's feelings. It's actually really helpful for him to be able to have those kinds of differences and to register them. Yeah.
Okay, now we have Marked by Zoe.
Marked by Zoe. Here's your question.
How does Diana merging with the Book of Life affect her powers? Does it make her stronger, or does it give her more knowledge on witches, demons, and vampires?
So it's about how does Diana's merging with the Book of Life change her powers? And there were some specific examples. But here's my question to you. How did your merging with Times Convert change your powers? Right? Just think about that for a minute. Ideally, when you read something, it should make an impact on you. It should change your mind. It should make you think about things, have new questions. And your power shifts. Maybe it has increased your power of empathy. Maybe it's increased the magic of curiosity in your life. Maybe it's made you want to research your own family history, which I highly recommend because everyone's got one. And most people think, oh, I'll never know anything. I have never, ever failed to take anybody back 5 generations in their family. It does not matter where they are from. I have done it with people who are of Chinese descent, Vietnamese descent, Guatemalan descent, Jewish descent. There is stuff to be known, right? So absorbing a book into you is a life changer, but it's not only in this moment. It continues to bubble and brew in you and in your mind. And you may go to Paris in 10 years and go to the Marais and think, oh, Freya. Now I'm really curious about aristocratic women in this part of Paris. Not Paris, this part of Paris. What stories can they tell? So knowledge is the root of wisdom, and knowledge is the root of power. So for Diana to join with the Book of Life, as she has so many other texts, is always going to change her power because she has greater understanding. We do not value service or expertise anymore. If I could do it all over again, I'm here to tell you, I would be an apprentice electrician because I find it fascinating how much we depend on it, how much we take it for granted, and I wish I had the skills to understand it and be able to debug it. I just had a lamp explode at home. So, I would love to be an electrician. And it's that kind of, that ability to be able to say, wow, this has changed me and I'm going to go on and do different things because of it. That's the magic of books, and it stems from knowledge and it stems from curiosity. So that's how it's changed Diana's power, and it will continue to do that. So, okay, it's 11 o'clock. We're at 50 minutes right now. So we're thinking we'll do 2 more questions and we will go from there. So yeah, Farmer Jill, that's Jill, my Jill, your Jill. Love the idea that absorbing the Book of Life is like doing genealogical research. Well, of course, right? When you find out your family's stories, you absolutely, it changes you. It changes your relationship to the past. If you ever watched Finding Your Roots with Professor Skip Gates, you know this. You see on TV it changing people's lives. And I've seen it in my classroom to know, and I always say to my students, I promise you, and I have a very diverse student population at the University of Southern California. I'm really blessed in that regard. And I always say to my students, I promise you that before the end of this course on family history, my family history will cross with one of yours. And I'm looking at people who are from Vietnam, and they are from Thailand, and they are from China, and they are from Germany, and they are from Denmark, and they look at me like, you're nuts. And, you know, in one case, one of my ancestors sat in judgment on someone else's indentured servant's legal case because she had an illegitimate child. And there on the jury was my ancestor judging the fate of her ancestor. So it always happens. We're all connected. And of course, that changed me forever, meeting the descendant of a woman who my ancestor had decided the fate of, not in a good way. So, you know, that was amazing. And yeah, genealogy, absorb the book of life. It's in you. Next question.
This is from Mary Ann Matkas. How do you think Marcus reconciles common sense and the generational wealth of vampires?
Say the name again.
Mary Ann Matkas.
Okay, Mary Ann Matkas, I think is what the name is. I'm sorry if we pronounced it wrong. And the question is a really good one. How does Marcus reconcile the wealth he has as a declaremont and the message and common sense, right? Not well. A lot of the things that Marcus does following his becoming a vampire and under very poor supervision are about, you know, spreading the wealth, making immortality available to whoever crosses his path without thinking about the consequences. You know, being an entrepreneur, being at the start of all kinds of things, some of which fail. I mean, Miriam is always laughing at him for all of his weird, you know, get rich quick schemes that, you know, don't pan out. So he has a really problematic relationship with wealth, as he would at being born and raised on the frontier of Massachusetts in an agricultural family. However, you know, he's changing. He's realizing that wealth can be a tool of assistance. That's why the great question about what is Marcus thinking right now, you know? He's thinking about how to do good in the world with the resources that he has, is privileged enough to have. And if more people did that with their resources, be they time, knowledge, whatever, expertise, you know, the world would be a better place. But that takes a service mentality and a belief that being in service to others is a valuable thing. And so Marcus is really trying to do that, not just be the person who is, you know, it's the haves versus the have-nots, but okay, as somebody who now has, how can I reach out to people who don't have my privileges and make things better? But it's a very uneasy subject for somebody who idolized pain. But it begins it doesn't begin with a redistribution of wealth. It may end there, but it doesn't begin there. It begins with first appreciating that everyone you meet has equal dignity and sovereignty to yourself. That's where it starts. If you don't have that, it doesn't matter how many things you give away, right? If you still think these people are inferior to you, you're not a follower of Thomas Paine. And Marcus truly believes that everyone has the same sovereignty and dignity that he has. Great questions. These are such good questions. Oh my God, you guys are like the ideal students. All right, I think we've got time for one more.
We have our final question from Sam Parsons.
Sam Parsons, this one's for you.
Equality is evidently a core value for Marcus, which creates tension in the vampire world of privilege and hierarchy. Phoebe seems to come from a place of privilege. How does this sit with Marcus?
Well, that's a great question. So the question is, you know, Marcus, you know, does believe in equality, and yet Phoebe does come from a place of privilege. Her father's a diplomat, but it's not an uncomplicated privilege because Phoebe is mixed race. She is female. So these are not easy, straightforward privilege. In a lot of ways, Marcus will always have more privilege than Phoebe because he's a white-skinned man. Right? So what Marcus has is an awareness now of the many different kinds of privilege that are in the world. It's no accident that most of the institutions I talk about are in some way, shape, or form republics in which a small elected or selected oligarchy makes decisions for a bigger collective. Marcus loves democracy. Philippe was a huge ideological fan of democracy as long as he was in charge of it. But Marcus is like, you know, he's really been a student of privilege since he was born as a human. And he continues to be, because, you know, he's only been at it for 250 years. He's not an expert. It's going to take him a while. He made several radical experiments in equality that did not end well, and that actually ended in further subjugation, control, coercion, etc. And I think it's a really good thing for us to remember as we are at this crucial point, this 250th anniversary of the American experiment. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to have failures. You have to acknowledge them. You have to face them. You have to atone for them. You have to do your best to alleviate the consequences. And then you need to do better. And so for him, he's in love with Phoebe. And he takes her wholeheartedly for who and what she is, which is a mixed race woman who has had some economic privilege and a great deal of institutional prejudice leveled against her. And he treats her as an equal in all ways, including gender, right? Matthew would not have chosen Miriam to make Phoebe, right? Marcus did, because he wanted her to have every advantage and also to have an independent source of support outside of him that was formidable and that was respected. Matthew wouldn't have made that choice. And so Marcus is trying to put, as we all should be, he's trying to put his ideals about equality now into practice with himself, with the people around him, and most importantly with his mate, because he's trying to not just talk the talk, he's trying to walk the walk. So it's an ongoing thing, and there will be little blips and, you know, valleys and problems along the way, and we'll get to see those hopefully. So I want to thank you guys again. I mean, I could go on for another 4 hours with y'all. We're not going to do that because, for one thing, I'm thirsty. But you know, I'm really looking. We're going to do more of these. I just want to mention, just as a little teaser, we are going to do a kind of Blackbird Oracle read-along following the release of the paperback on May 6th. So for those of you who don't know, the Blackbird Oracle is coming out in paperback on May the 6th. At the end of the month, when the action in the book starts, we're going to start another one of these little online clubadoodles. If you are not yet a member of the All Souls Discretion Group, this is your moment to join so that you can take part in the ongoing online discussions. We are going to make more of those little mini lectures about various parts of the read-along process. We will gather for at least one of these Instagram lives based on the quality of your questions and the interactions. We may want to, you know, the action of that book takes place basically over the course of 2-3 months. We may do a couple of these Instagram lives so that we can get all of your questions in. But the most important thing to me, again, is thank you for being part of this community, with sharing your thoughts and your connections and your insights with others. If there's other things that you'd like me to talk about, if you'd like me to do a little tutorial on how you can look and research into your own family, I'm open to that. It's all good. I am actually, you know, I'm not going to be teaching anymore in higher ed as of June 30th. I'm going to be focusing full-time on writing and doing this kind of teaching, which I really love, which is just being able to interact with folks who do the reading and have the great thoughts and connections. So let's talk about what you might like to learn a little bit more about in the future. Things you might like me to copy, just drop them, cover in my little mini lectures, drop them in the comments. Jill and Annie and Bridget and Kat are, you know, scouring your comments and coming up with plans. And, oh, Deb, can you talk about this? Can you talk about that? and happy to do that. So, you all said you wanted to be in my classroom. Well, guess what? On July 1st, this is my classroom, and I'm looking forward to all of you coming by and visiting with me and with each other. And again, the most important thing is that we are all souls, and we value each other and respect each other and learn from each other. So thank you for being part of my great experiment, which is building out this world in this community in the hopes that it would make a difference to people. So thanks again. Much good wishes for those of you who are celebrating milestones and celebrations and moments in your own faith traditions or in your family traditions. I'll be thinking of all of you when I have deviled eggs tomorrow, because that's my faith tradition, the deviled egg. All right, guys, have a wonderful Saturday. Thanks for your patience again as I was late and as we had technical difficulties. Couldn't be doing this without my huge support team, without Bridget and Annie and Jill and Kat and all of you. So we are a multitude. We are all souls, and it's a beautiful thing to be part of this group. Thanks again, guys. Bye. I'm going to try to X out now. Good luck. Here I come. Extreme close-up of my face.